So when you think of climate change, most people their mind immediately goes to global warming. Well, that's pretty accurate in terms of the project that I've just done and the hotspot that I just wrote about climate change. So here we're going to talk about what exactly this global warming phenomenon is. What do you think the cause to climate change was?
From my understanding, the cause of climate change seems to be, or at least the question of climate change comes to how much it was caused by humans and the Industrial Revolution and how much gases were put out in the atmosphere. So before humans became an industrialized society, there wasn't a whole lot of carbon dioxide emissions, a whole lot of greenhouse gases. And the idea is the more gases that are put out in that atmosphere, creates kind of a greenhouse effect and it keeps heat in, so temperatures start to rise. That's kind of my.
So to elaborate on what Doc was talking about, the Industrial Revolution is basically a time where carbon emissions and other greenhouse gases began to exceed the amount that the environment can naturally handle. So your trees and things like that, taking in this carbon dioxide and converting it into natural oxygen. So here pictured is an assembly line creating cars. So Henry Ford is a big part of this. He invented this assembly line, which basically made the production of cars so much easier. And so this is really the beginning of where we're going to start seeing, multitudes of cars on the road. Now the numbers past 6 billion cars on the road. We have 7 billion people, and the population and number of cars only set to rise. And so as these cars are the number one, emitters of this carbon dioxide gas and other greenhouse gases, it's going to be a huge part of figuring out how to solve this problem based on this historical factor. So, the invention of cars and this assembly line are going to be your two biggest contributors to what is now one of the biggest problems in the world, that is global warming. And Henry Ford, although a very important guy for history, also sort of sparked what is going to be, a global problem that, he probably had no idea he was doing. So to help explain what Dr. Gunninger was talking about when he said a surface air temperature increase, we're going to take a look at this map that's going to take into effect a change over 100 years, so from 1960 to about 2060. And one thing that you'll notice at first is that 2060 is about 50 years in the future. So what it's doing is taking into account the predicted temperature increases that we'll see in the next 50 years based on where our society and culture is leading us to right now. So the scale goes from about negative 10 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius. So obviously there's no blue, so nothing is really getting much colder. However, you're going to see a lot of red and yellow and mostly orange around the map. And basically what that's saying is that in degrees Celsius, our Earth's surface air temperature is looking to increase from about 2 all the way up to 10 degrees Celsius. Now, 10 degrees Celsius is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So where we're seeing those numbers is in the northern and southern poles, where temperatures are already very low. Habitats and animals and people, the very few people that live there, are very used to the temperature there. So a change in 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which some of it has already been taken into account, um, is a huge change, and the habitats and the animals that live there cannot possibly change fast enough. The humans can always leave, but the animals and the habitats that already placed there are basically stuck in an environment which is set to change just rapidly right around them. Now, in the rest of the world where most other people live, we're looking at orange, mostly light orange. And what it's saying is that temperatures can raise all the way up to 3 degrees Celsius, starting from 1960 to 20, all the way going to 2060. So a little bit of has already taken effect, but it's also predicting a lot more. And that's actually pretty interesting, seeing as normal people, we're not very much so taking into account how much the Earth has gotten warmer, because to the normal person, we're not really. I mean, you can't see it. It's not something you can grasp. It's sort of just happening, and so the normal person isn't really taking into account how much of a change this has been and what it's going to be. However, what Dr. Gruninger is going to talk about is how it's going to be more about people down the road in about 50 years, so the next generation or the generation after that. So what we're looking at here is a political cartoon that is showing a picture of a snowman and a man, and the snowman's wearing a sign that says "Repent, the end is near, global warming is here." So what this is reflecting is the map that we just looked at, in that the northern and southern temperatures, where snow is a huge part of the environment, um, it's saying that snow is going to be a thing of the past, basically, and that if you don't do something about the global warming that's going on, we're going to have this huge problem, and where snow is no longer going to be a thing. Temperature is going to be so much higher and stuff like that, and basically the environment is just going to be a completely different thing. So now we're going to figure out how greenhouse gases are causing global warming. These greenhouse gases exactly doing that is making the climate essentially rise in terms of temperature.
They basically block heat from being able to be released. They kind of form this kind of molecular shield around the Earth, so that the heat that comes in from the sun doesn't get reflected back out. So there's like, you see the sun rays coming in, heat energy coming in. Usually they'd be reflected out and radiate out in space. And the more gases there are that surround the Earth, the more that energy gets trapped inside the Earth.
So here we're looking at a visual that's going to help explain exactly how carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are working. So pictured above is going to be, some sunlight that hits the earth is reflected, sun becomes heat. Now, that's a very natural process. It's how the sun naturally heats the earth. It's exactly what we want it to do. However, in some instances, CO2 and other gases in the atmosphere trap heat, keeping the Earth warm. So they're keeping it inside our ozone layer and essentially raising the surface air temperature abnormally, and aside from exactly what we want from the sun's natural heating. And that becomes a huge problem as more and more of these gases are being inserted in the environment, and then less and less trees are being able to take them out of the environment. So as the sun basically stays the same, the earth isn't getting any further away from the sun. We have to figure out solutions to this problem. So this is how that works. So this is one of the better pictures I've ever seen for my project, and what it's displaying is basically the earth plugged into an oil canister. It's so basically saying that oil powers the earth, and it is so true in terms of how our economies and our society and our entire global network is going right now. So all these countries are going to see everybody plugged into an oil run basically earth. So everything has to do with oil: economies, societies, classes, government, all that stuff is having to do with oil. And so oil being one of the biggest fossil fuels that when burned does create these same greenhouse gases that in turn, basically heat up the environment around us, being like the hugest part of every single society. Obviously the numbers at which they're being burned are going to be astronomical, and so that's only one of the parts of the contemporary factors that I found for global warming. And now we're going to look at deforestation. So, as for some background information, trees are a large part of the Earth, because what they do is they take in these carbon dioxide atoms and they transmit them into breathable oxygen atoms, and that's basically their job. So, deforestation is going to be large quantities of these trees and forests being cut down in order to make space for factories, homes, buildings, things like that. And so deforestation is actually only one of the parts of demographic issues that we have. So another part is going to be a growing population, an exponentially growing population, actually. And so what that's doing is creating more people that require, more materials and more energy, basically, to run and function on. And so with more people come more cars, and that's just very indicative of this compounding effort at which the earth is becoming more and more warm, because all these problems are compounding one another. So what we're looking at is, how does climate change affect me? How does it affect the normal person? And this is actually a really important question, because climate change works very interestingly. So Dr. Gruninger is actually going to answer this question for us right now. So how do you think climate change is affecting like the average person, maybe a student at Jesuit or a teacher at Jesuit?
Probably not that much, other than you see your weeds coming in earlier, or the winters are colder or warmer. Seeing kind of a difference in the climate as far as a long-term effect or a significant effect on our everyday lives. No, I think the picture here is what's going to happen, 50 years from now, what's
Yeah.
going to happen with our grandkids, that kind of stuff. That's where the significant effects might occur.
Okay. So what do you think could be some of the either long-term or short-term solutions to a climate that's going upwards and upwards really quickly?
I think we already kind of started that with kind of regulations we put on automobiles and stuff on factories, but I think basically for any kind of big significant amount of effect, you'd have to change the way industrialized nations live. So if you look at the United States or the rest of the world, if everybody lived the way that we did, carbon emissions would go up astronomically. So I think the game now is how to get people to change, how to buy into change to save the environment, and how do you make efficient means of transportation and energy that don't release these types of greenhouse gases.
So as for material solutions to climate change, we have subtle ones such as solar panels, which are going to take energy from the sun and use it elsewhere. We also have fluorescent light bulbs, which are more efficient, less energy requiring light bulbs that are just going to do better jobs than regular light bulbs. So, in conclusion, our solutions to climate change are going to can include some material items such as fluorescent light bulbs, solar panels. Also, wind turbines are going to do a good job of that. But the biggest part that needs to be understood is that global warming can only be stopped by a global effort, and that's the only way to do it. Society has to come together as one in order to, prevent this global phenomenon from spreading any further. Thank you.